History is often written by the loud. It is written by the men who fire the guns, the men who stand on the hoods of cars screaming at the police, the men who crave the flash of the camera bulb more than the gold in the vault. When we look back at the blood-soaked chronicle of the 1930s, this public enemy era, our eyes are naturally drawn to the noise. We see John Dillinger. We see the crooked smirk, the straw boater hat, the Thompson submachine gun held like a scepter. We see a man who defied the United States government and became a folk hero to a starving nation. We are told that he was the mastermind, the alpha, the jackrabbit who could outrun the FBI and outsmart J. Edgar Hoover. But there is a flaw in that story. A fatal flaw. John Dillinger was a farm boy. He was charismatic, yes, and he was brave, but he was reckless. He was impulsive. He was a man who, left to his own devices, would have robbed a grocery store and been caught in a week. Yet, for 14 months, he operated with the precision of a military general. He navigated police dragnets with supernatural foresight. He escaped inescapable prisons. He managed a complex network of safe houses, money laundering, and public relations that was far beyond the capacity of a common thug. The FBI spent decades trying to understand how a man with an 8th-grade education could humiliate the Department of Justice. They never found the answer because they were looking for a man. They should have been looking for the woman in the red heels, her name, or at least, the name she used in the whisper networks of the Chicago underworld, was Vivian Vane. But to the inner circle of the Dillinger gang, she had no name. She was simply the boss. Or, when they were drunk and terrified, they called her the devil in heels. She was not a girlfriend. She was not a mole. She was the CEO of the Dillinger gang. She was a woman of terrifying beauty and icy intellect who took a rough, unpolished criminal and sculpted him into a legend, only to discard him when he stopped being useful. This is the untold story of the puppet master who wore silk, smoked Egyptian cigarettes, and held the leash of the most dangerous man in America. The year was 1933. The Great Depression had turned the Midwest into a graveyard of ambition. In the back room of a smoky speakeasy on the north side of Chicago, John Dillinger was loud, drunk, and bragging about a small-time robbery. He was wearing a cheap suit that didn't fit, and he was surrounded by sycophants who were drinking on his dime. In the corner of the room, sitting alone at a booth upholstered in velvet, was Vivian. Eyewitness accounts from the time describe her as a creature from another world. She had hair like spun obsidian, skin as pale as moonlight, and she wore a tailored suit with a skirt that was daringly short for the time, revealing legs that ended in blood-red stiletto heels. She wasn't looking at Dillinger with admiration. She was looking at him with the cold calculation of a butcher eyeing a side of beef. She didn't approach him. She waited. When the night wound down and Dillinger's friends had abandoned him, leaving him with a tab he couldn't pay, Vivian signaled the bartender. She paid the bill. She walked over to the table, the click of her heels cutting through the silence like a metronome. She didn't flirt. She didn't smile. She placed a lit cigarette between her red lips and said, "You have a lot of noise, Mr. Dillinger, but you have no melody. You're going to get yourself killed before you spend a dime of that money. Unless you come with me." That night, John Dillinger didn't go home. He went to a penthouse suite at the Congress Hotel, registered under a fake name. It was there that the devil in heels laid out the terms of his employment. It was not a partnership, it was an acquisition. Vivian Vane was a former architectural student who had been denied a degree because of her gender. She understood structure. She understood flow. She understood that a bank was not a fortress, it was a machine with moving parts. She showed Dillinger blueprints, not hand-drawn sketches, but professional architectural schematics of the First National Bank. She traced the lines with a manicured fingernail. "You don't run in screaming," she told him. "You walk in. You control the time. You control the fear. Fear is a currency, John. If you spend it right, nobody gets hurt, and we walk out rich." The transformation of John Dillinger was total. Vivian took him to tailors who dressed politicians. She taught him how to stand, how to speak to the press, how to charm the ladies. She created the Robin Hood persona. It was her idea to burn the mortgage papers during the bank robberies. She knew that if the public loved him, the police would have a harder time finding him. She weaponized the media. While Dillinger was the face on the front page, Vivian was the editor in the shadows. She controlled the money. She took 60% of every haul. The gang grumbled, but they never said a word to her face. There was something about Vivian, a sharpness in her eyes, a suggestion of violence, that terrified even men like Babyface Nelson. They knew that while Dillinger carried a point for 5, Vivian carried a mind that could dismantle them without lifting a finger. The height of her power was the Crown Point jail escape. History tells us Dillinger carved a gun out of wood. It's a cute story. A fairy tale. The reality was far more cynical and far more expensive. When Dillinger was captured, Vivian didn't panic. She went to work. She knew that the sheriff, Lillian Holly, was under immense pressure and that the guards were underpaid. Vivian didn't need a wooden gun. She needed a checkbook. She infiltrated the jail's supply chain. She compromised a guard, not with sex, but with debt relief. She paid off his gambling debts in exchange for a clear path. The wooden gun? That was Vivian's idea of a joke. It was theater. She instructed Dillinger to use it to humiliate the authorities. Make them look like fools, John, she told him during a visitation where she posed as his weeping sister. If they look like clowns, you look like a king. The escape went off exactly as she planned, down to the second. When Dillinger drove away in the sheriff's car, singing, he wasn't singing because he was free. He was singing because he knew Vivian was waiting for him. But the tragedy of the puppet is that he eventually wants to cut the strings. By the summer of 1934, John Dillinger had started to believe his own press. He was intoxicated by the fame. He started disobeying Vivian's strict rules. He went to clubs without disguises. He contacted old girlfriends. He spent money recklessly. The discipline that Vivian had instilled in him was unraveling. The devil in heels watched this deterioration with growing coldness. She realized that her asset was becoming a liability. In the world of high-stakes crime, a liability is a death sentence. The turning point was the shootout at Little Bohemia. It was a disaster. The FBI swarmed the lodge, and the gang barely escaped with their lives. Vivian was furious. She had warned him against that location. She had told him it was a trap. When Dillinger arrived at the safe house in Chicago, bleeding and laughing maniacally about the thrill of the fight, Vivian looked at him and realized the project was over. The machine was broken. It was time to liquidate the asset. This brings us to the most controversial and shadowed chapter of the story, the Lady in Red. History blames Anna Sage. We are told she was a madam trying to avoid deportation. But Anna Sage was a small fish. She didn't have the connections to contact Melvin Purvis directly without being arrested. She needed a broker. Vivian Vane was that broker. It was Vivian who approached Anna Sage. It was Vivian who orchestrated the betrayal. She knew that the FBI needed a win. She knew that if she gave them Dillinger, the heat would die down, and she could vanish with the millions she had skimmed from the gang's operations over the last year. The meeting between Vivian and Anna Sage took place in a tea room on State Street. It was brief. Vivian slid a terrifyingly precise dossier across the table, a plan detailing exactly where Dillinger would be, what he would be wearing, and what movie he wanted to see. He likes Manhattan melodrama, Vivian said, her voice devoid of any emotion. Take him there. Wear red. Don't look back. Anna Sage didn't do it for the visa. She did it because Vivian Vane gave her an offer she couldn't refuse: betray John, or face the wrath of the woman who owned him. On the night of July 22, 1934, Vivian Vane did not stay home. She parked her black coupe a block away from the Biograph Theater. She rolled down the window, letting the oppressive heat of the Chicago night fill the car. She lit one of her signature Egyptian cigarettes and watched. She watched the FBI agents take their positions. She saw Anna Sage walking in the orange-red skirt. And she saw John. He looked happy. He looked like a man without a care in the world, completely unaware that the woman who had built him had just signed his death warrant. When the shots rang out, 3 distinct pops that silenced the street, Vivian didn't flinch. She didn't cry. She didn't look away. She watched the body fall. She watched the crowd swarm forward, dipping their handkerchiefs in the blood of the legend she had created. To the world, it was the death of a monster. To Vivian, it was simply the closing of a business account. She checked her diamond-encrusted watch, noted the time, put the car in gear, and drove away into the labyrinth of the city. She left nothing behind. No fingerprints. No photographs. The police raided Dillinger's apartments and found clothes, money, and guns, but they never found a trace of the woman who had paid the rent. The FBI files contain vague references to a mystery woman seen in the background of crime scenes. A woman in high heels who seemed to be directing traffic, but they never pursued the lead. It was easier to blame the dead man than to hunt a ghost, so what happened to the devil in heels? Rumors suggest she moved to Europe just before the war broke out. Some say she settled in Paris and used her fortune to fund the resistance, using the same guerrilla tactics she perfected in the Midwest to fight the Nazis. Others say she moved to Hollywood, reinventing herself as a producer, a woman who controlled the stars from behind a desk, just as she had controlled Dillinger. There is even a chilling theory that she stayed in Chicago, marrying a high-ranking judge or politician, living out her days as a respected socialite. Hosting dinner parties where she would politely listen to men talk about the wild days of Dillinger, hiding a smirk behind her champagne glass. John Dillinger is buried under 3 feet of concrete to stop grave robbers. But the real treasure was never in his grave. The real story was the woman who walked away. She proved that in a man's world, the most dangerous weapon isn't a Tommy gun. It is a woman with a plan, a lack of conscience, and a pair of killer heels. John Dillinger was the poster boy for crime, but Vivian Vane was the CEO of chaos. And while everybody knows his name, nobody knows hers. That, in the end, was her greatest heist. She stole her own history, leaving us with nothing but the shadow of the devil in heels.